Hi, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. You had a great weekend. It was such nice weather and so nice. Tonight's Sunday night for me. I was hoping to get the video done earlier today, but I just couldn't resist being outside all day. So I hope you guys got outside and enjoyed the nice weather. Today, we're going to quickly go through Unit 6 review, and this is the whole learning unit. And I can get this done in one video because it's one of the shorter units. Really, in this unit, you have to focus on just remembering classical conditioning with Pavlov, the operant conditioning, the punishment versus reinforcement, and the schedules of reinforcement, and then observational learning, which is with Bandura, and that's the Bobo doll experiment. So those are kind of like the three big components I'm going to quickly review for you. You have, don't forget, you have that great cram packet. All of this stuff is going to be super helpful for you for the test. We have about a little over 2 weeks before the test. I'm still feeling like pretty confident for you guys. Please just keep doing, I would just really stress review every day. Do something with AP Psych, 10 to 15 minutes a day, not too long. In addition to like my videos and the homework and stuff, just, doing that on your own, going through the packet. There's the quiz that I have for you that has a bunch of terms in it. So just be doing something with AP Psych. Okay. Okay. All right, let's get started on this. So again, these are the three types of learning that are going to be tested on in this unit. So classical conditioning is that learning to link like two stimuli that don't have anything to do with each other together in order to see what the reaction is. And remember, that's Pavlov. Watson did that with little Albert. And then operant conditioning, that's changing behaviors due to consequences or like reinforcement. So I've been doing a lot of that with Charlie and her online school. So like she has to finish certain assignments each day before she gets iPad time. And so I'm doing a lot of operant conditioning with her the last few, I guess, months now. And then cognitive learning, this is more the social observational learning aspect of it, and that's acquiring new behaviors and information through the observation. So watching people, observing, rather than the direct information and experience. Okay? All right, so here are, again, just these things in a little bit different of a format. So classical conditioning, again, it's this neutral stimulus, which is paired with a natural response. Operant conditioning is really focused solely on reinforcement and punishment and what's going to increase behavior or decrease behavior. And then observational learning, that's the learning that occurs through watching others and observing information. Okay, so again, if I was a behaviorist, strictly behaviorist, I would want to just, it's all about behaviors. It's not about feelings. I would really be focused on, what's happening, how can we change behaviors, how can we increase or decrease behaviors. So I would want nothing to do with feelings or what happened in the past or unconditional positive regard. A behaviorist would strictly they would just want to know what's happening with your behavior, okay? All right, so how do we learn? We learn by associative learning. We learn to sit quietly at church because we watch everybody else sit quietly at church. We learn what to do when the bell rings at school. Like, this is all how we learn. It's associative learning. So you learn to associate a response with a consequence, okay? All right, so the big key components in classical conditioning, Pavlov, Ivan Pavlov, so really be familiar with Pavlov's experiment with the dog, and there's slides right after this slide to go over that. John Watson was a huge one with learning unit and behavior, so make sure you're just familiar with the Little Albert experiment. Remember, he was the one that took that 9-month-old baby and paired the side of like a white fuzzy rat with this big hammer, like hitting like gong, kind of really loud noise. And then he conditioned little Albert to be then scared of every white fuzzy thing that came across due to classical conditioning. Garcia's taste aversion, we talked a little bit about that. He injected these rats with this stuff that made them nauseous, so then they didn't like certain things. So it's the same thing. If we eat bad cheese on pizza, it's gross. We're going to associate every pizza now with that, and we won't want it. Okay, so that's that Garcia's taste aversion. Big things to keep in mind here: unconditioned stimulus. It's that unlearned, natural occurring thing. So in Pavlov's experiment, it's like the food, right? Unconditioned response, that's the jumping or the flinching if we were talking about like thunder, or it's that salivation for Pavlov's dog. It's that unconditioned response. It just happens naturally. Then the neutral stimulus or conditioned stimulus, those end up actually being the same. So in Pavlov's experiment, it ends up being that the bell that he takes to condition with the food. So the neutral stimulus and the conditioned stimulus end up coming together and mean the same thing, but it's just this neutral thing they're pairing it with. Okay, and then the conditioned response, ends up sometimes being the unconditioned response. So like salivation or jumping, scared, whatever it is. Okay, so make sure you go over those if you're not really familiar. Go back in the book, go back on my Prezi. Know the unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, and then the conditioned response. And so just these are kind of just a little diagram of what that looks like. Let me see if I can move this down a little before I go that way. Okay, so before classical conditioning, so you have this neutral stimulus, which, here's the bell. It has no emotional meaning to someone. It's not going to create a response for anything. They're like, whatever, it's just a bell. And then you have the unconditioned stimulus, right, which is food, right? And that is going to, create, ooh, it's my dinner. A dog might salivate for that, right? So this is all before any conditioning is happening. So then during the conditioning or that acquisition phase, keyword there, you have this bell that's dinging and the food together, and then you have this behavior by the dog. Then he salivates. Okay, so that's during the classical conditioning, and that phase is called acquisition, and it's really where the dog starts to know bell, food, bell, food, bell, food, and then it, you repeat it all these times so that they start to get it, and then then you only have to ring the bell, and the dog is going to start to salivate. Right? Without even seeing the food, you're going to just hear the bell, and that's when you know that you've classically conditioned has happened. Okay, here's another just quick little visual of this. So again, before conditioning, you have that food, and then that is going to create this unconditioned response. Automatically, he's going to salivate. And then before conditioning, he's got this neutral stimulus, this bell, and the dog's like, whatever. But when you condition it together, so you put those things together and condition the dog, and then he's just going to respond to the bell versus both the bell and because you conditioned him. Make sense? I hope so. Just another quick one here. Again, before conditioning, the bell has no meaning to the dog, right? And the steak, that would give you this unconditioned response of salivation. So these are before, but then during conditioning, where you're trying to get that acquisition, where you do bell, steak, bell, steak, bell, steak, and then finally he's like, oh, I get this. If I hear the bell, and it's just going to be the salivation. Okay. So a couple key terms, acquisition, we talked about that. That's just like the pairing of bell, food, bell, food, bell, food. And that's where he associates, or someone associates that that's what's going to happen. Okay. Generalization, that happens when they start to generalize all objects. So with Albert, it started with this little fuzzy rat that he was afraid of. Then it generalized to all white furry objects. Remember, he even was afraid of Santa Claus, seeing that, although that guy was really scary. But they generalized to all objects then, okay? Extinction is when that response goes away. So remember when we conditioned think it was Aiden and Ivana with the spray, right? And I was saying can. Well, eventually it didn't matter that I kept saying can because they knew that they were going to get sprayed in the face and they just like kind of took it, right? So it was that extinction. No, they weren't, flinching and, kind of reacting anymore. They just kind of knew that every time I said can, that was going to happen, so that that behavior it was extinct. But then spontaneous recovery is then after a period of time where that behavior is extinct, then it comes back out of nowhere. So that's called spontaneous recovery. Okay. So that was all classical conditioning. Okay, Ivan Pavlov, or John Watson with little Albert. And then we shift into operant conditioning. And this is really Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. And this is really the law of effect. So our behaviors are followed by positive outcomes. Are they increasing behavior or are they decreasing behavior? Okay, so behaviors followed by positive outcomes typically increase behavior, right? And behaviors, negative outcomes usually decrease behaviors. Okay, so again, it was B.F. Skinner. Thorndike is in here. I don't know if you'll see Thorndike as much as you would see B.F. Skinner. He was the one with the rats. He had that chamber where the rats kind of like pressed that lever and they got food that came out. So it increased their behavior. And he was also the one that, I think he was the one that trained the pigeons too to play ping pong and to read. We watched videos about them. Okay, so in operant conditioning, it's all reinforcement versus punishment. Remember, reinforcement increases behavior. Punishment decreases behavior. Okay, and then things that would increase or decrease behavior, it's either positive, where you're adding something, not good or bad, you're just adding a stimulus, right? And then negative would be you're taking away a stimulus, okay? So with punishment versus reinforcement, don't think good or bad. You want to think positive is adding something, like adding a ticket because you speed, right? It's going to decrease your behavior to speed again. So that would be positive punishment. Okay. And then taking away a stimulus, that's going to, either increase or decrease behavior again. Okay, so here's a little chart here. Specific consequences are associated with voluntary behavior. So rewards introduced increase the behavior, where punishment is going to decrease the behavior. Okay, so let's look at this here, this cute little chart. So you really have to know the difference between like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment versus negative punishment. Okay, so again, I really want you to keep in mind that reinforcement increases behavior, punishment decreases behavior. So positive reinforcement would be adding something to reinforce behavior. So if Charlie gets all of her schoolwork done, I'm going to give her time on the iPad. So she's going to get the stimulus. She adds something to that, right? And it's going to increase her behavior, right? She's going to keep on working through all those assignments, right? Okay, where negative reinforcement, we're removing a stimulus. Okay, so let's say that I smell bad, right? So I'm gonna take a shower and then it's going to remove that smell. So that's negative reinforcement. So it's going to increase my behavior to keep taking showers, right? Okay. Where positive punishment. So remember, with positive punishment, that's adding something, adding a stimulus to decrease behavior, because punishment decreases behavior. So I'm giving you a detention because you weren't good in class. Okay, right? So I'm adding that behavior, or I'm adding that stimulus to decrease your behavior. Okay, and then negative punishment, I'm going to take away something to decrease your behavior. So you're going to lose your car privileges because you came home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, makes sense? Just make sure you look over that. This is all kind of on that cram packet again for you with some good examples. Okay, last thing here. Couple last things here. So remember, primary versus secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers, they're like food, water, shelter, those kinds of things are primary reinforcers, so they aid in survival. And then secondary reinforcers are like money, power, those kinds of things. And those all kind of help us, that reinforces and our behavior. Okay, operant conditioning, this is that schedule of reinforcement. So this is super important to understand too. So make sure that you know the differences between the schedules of reinforcement. So continuous reinforcement is that a reinforcer follows every response. So if I say good job after every time you answer a question, it's not really going to make a big difference, right? It's every single time you say something, it's going to kind of get old after a while, but that's continuous reinforcement. The fixed interval, this is fixed means predictable. So keep in mind when you're thinking fixed versus variable, fixed is predictable. So it's every time something happens. So response after a specific time period is reinforced. So this one says you put on a new face mask, you wait 15 minutes, and voila, you have a clean, fresh face. That's a good one. Another example of fixed interval is like a reward, like a paycheck. So every 2 weeks you get your paycheck and you're reinforced. So fixed is predictable. Interval is the amount of time that you're responding. So like every 2 weeks you get a paycheck. Okay. Variable, keep in mind when you think variable, you don't know when it's going to get reinforced. Okay. And then interval, we're still thinking the amount of time. Okay. So for variable interval, this is the response after varying time period. Okay. So you check and recheck Instagram to see how many likes were on your picture. Like that's a variable interval in the schedule of reinforcement. Let me see if there's a better example here. So you're rewarded after a random amount of time has passed. Fishing could be that way as well. Okay, and then fixed ratio, fixed, again, don't forget, fixed is predictable. Ratio is the number of times responding. Okay, so fixed number of responses must occur before your reinforcement. So like at Denville Dairy, they have those cards. So after you buy 10 scoops, you get the 11th for free, right? They do that at Starbucks, all those things. Those are fixed ratio schedules, okay? And then there's the variable ratio, okay? So varying number of responses must occur before reinforcement. So a good one of this is like slot machines. That's a good example. What do I have here? Actively scroll Twitter, hoping to find an interesting or funny tweet to amuse you. It's kind of the same thing. You don't know. It's unpredictable because it's variable, and the ratio is the number of times responding. Okay. Another chart here for you on this one is fixed ratio. A student receives a reward after a fixed number of times they perform a desired behavior. That's a good one. Variable ratio, a student receives a reward after a variable number of times they perform a desired behavior. Fixed interval, a student receives a reward after a fixed period of time, like 5 minutes. And then variable interval, a student receives a reward after a variable period of time. Oops, let me see where that, after a desired behavior. So hopefully that helps. Again, that cram packet, there's good examples in there, just knowing the differences between that. But with the ratio schedules, the thing to keep in mind is the faster learning of responses, like the ratio schedules allow for faster learning of responses, but interval schedules, like they're more resistant to extinction, okay? All right, and then the last part is observational learning. This is Albert Bandura. Remember, he did the Bobo doll experiment. That's where he had these kids who watched adults model the behavior of like hitting that Bobo doll. But then the kids even took it to the next level. Remember the video we watched where the kids were like remember that little boy, he was like shooting the Bobo doll. He didn't see the adults shoot, but he was, really, they were like taking mallets and just really kicking the Bobo doll's butt with it. And they didn't even see that behavior, but they saw the adults being really aggressive to the Bobo doll. Okay, so that's all modeling behavior and observational learning, and that is with Albert Bandura. Okay, 20 minutes of quick review on the learning unit. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. May 4th is the although I've heard that you can even do a simulation on the upload process now. It says in my notes from my webinar that we can do like a practice AP Psych upload like simulation on May 4th. But I have heard through my Facebook blog that some of the teachers have got in already and done that. But May 4th, you can do that. Please reach out to me if you haven't heard from College Board and aren't getting their emails, because it's super important that you are getting those emails because you need that e-ticket to take the test. And again, I love when you guys reach out to me, so please don't hesitate. Google chat, emails, whatever. If you need anything, I'm happy, happy, happy to help. And I've loved seeing where all of you guys are going to school, so congratulations on all of that. Okay, I will see you guys on Tuesday. Take care.